1, 2, 3. It's June the 1st, and it's the 10th episode, Mr. Jim Grant. The 10th episode. Whoever thought we'd get this far of the cruise? You put the news together with Craig, and you get cruise, and you leave Jim completely out of it, and he doesn't mind at all, because he's here and he's happy to be. So how are you today, Jim?
Happy to be here.
Yay!
Yeah. Welcome to episode 10, double figures
Yes.
of the cruise. Thanks all for the views. I thought we'd make it to 10 episodes, but I didn't think we'd be, I thought it would just be someone dog watching. I didn't realise we'd be averaging about 600-700 views an episode. So thank you very much for sharing the word on that. Coming up on today's show, and I hope you enjoy the mic that we plugged in and got just for you as well.
Yeah.
So coming up on today's show, this has been recorded on Monday the 1st of June. You should be watching it whenever you want, really, but it should be going out on Thursday the 4th of June. So what we've got, our first article is coronavirus. Some monkeys in India have stolen some samples. Then we're going to be looking at the government's here in the UK's new track and trace system from a variety of different angles. I was just talking about the George Floyd protest. So,
America on fire! America's on fire, Jim. Coast to coast, hundreds of cities.
And we're going to be talking about that incident from different angles. We're also going to be talking about President Trump's executive order on social media as well. And in closing the show, we're going to be looking at someone's sexual fantasy that went horribly wrong with an article from the BBC.
Or horribly right, Jim. Horribly right, potentially.
Yeah. So, our first article here today, this is from Reuters, and it's
Good
monkeys
people.
Steal coronavirus blood samples in India. So, a troop of monkeys in India attacked a medical official and snatched away blood samples of patients who had tested positive for the novel coronavirus, authorities said on Friday. The attack occurred this week when a laboratory technician was walking in the campus of a state-run medical college in Murat, 460 kilometres north of Lucknow, capital of Uttar Pradesh state. Monkeys grabbed and fled with the blood samples of 4 COVID-19 patients who are undergoing treatment. We had to take their blood samples again. So there you go. Monkeys are not up for track and trace.
What'd you do with the last blood I just gave you? I said, what?
Authorities said it was not clear if the monkeys had spilled the blood samples. People living near the leafy campus feared further spread of the virus if the monkeys carried the samples into residential areas.
They just couldn't confirm, Jim, how the monkeys were treating the virus samples? After the robbery, after the violence took place, the attack?
Well, they couldn't track and trace them, Craig.
I guess not. No, but
monkeys didn't have mobile phones.
Yeah, give them a couple of generations, Jim, if that. I'm sure there's a little colony being manipulated for just that very reason. They're monkeys, for crying out loud. Of course they stole the blood. Have you not seen movies with monkeys? What's that little one? The little freaky one with the yellow hat guy. Curious George, right?
Oh, Curious George. Yeah, I was thinking of the one in Indiana Jones where he kept stealing the dates and things.
Oh, I don't recall him. Yeah, I was thinking actually last night how I've not seen Indiana Jones. Apparently, there's one of my types of my lingam, my Shiva lingam, is apparently used in the in Indiana Jones. One of the I already know more than I knew about the Indiana Jones film in what I've just told you now, Jim. I was struck immediately. I thought, God, isn't it weird that I've still not seen Indiana Jones as I was reading information about the Indiana Jones film, about something that's like pretty dear to me, these little stones that I keep jammed into my joints so that I can think about other things while I speak to you. But then out of nowhere, it comes full circle in my life, and I've got to know about it. I think Destiny tells me that I've got to see the film. So there's a monkey in it, and what? He's a little. Let me guess, Jim. He's a little scamp. I bet he gets up. I bet he does. Of course he does. He's a little monkey, right? It's like I told you about the. I think on another episode I might have told you about. I think it was when I was in South Africa and saw a baboon. Well, he was chewing on the hire car windshield wiper of the hire car that I was paying for. A baboon was chewing on the windshield wiper while performing doggy, Jim. like both things seem separate. Like I just giving it a good old chew on the windshield wiper, maybe licking off the coolant or whatever that was on it. Bugs, probably, if I'm thinking about it. South Africa, probably just licking on locust guts. And then just like almost seemingly detach the lower half, just putting it to obviously the next ranking female. Totally. I should have went home that day, Jim. I always tell myself, like, Africa was never going to get better for me than that. Like, you just suddenly, like, right there, right on the other side of your windscreen, a monkey fucking while he's chewing on your windshield wiper plate. It was just like, that's it. Go. There's nothing better in Africa than what just happened now. That's
could have been worse, Craig. It could have been a monkey holding a vial of blood and coughing.
Totally. You just start to notice, what the hell does that monkey have there? Some sort of sample, honey. Yeah, totally. Just like, all right, this is the beginning of a bad film. This is the beginning of a bad film, Jim. Terrifying. It doesn't end well for us. It's like 12 Monkeys, isn't it? Just Isn't that, what was the actual takedown of 12 Monkeys? Pretty much this, what we're living right now, right? Just an outbreak because of the behavior of monkeys.
Yeah, spread early around the world through airports and things. And I remember on podcast 1 we wanted our borders closed here in the UK, but they didn't seem to get them. But yeah,
they weren't listening to us, Jim.
Yeah, but now it's all over the place. Now they want to do the track and tracing. But according to the Guardian here,
good people
an article here, I'm trying to find the writer, Rajiv Syal has written on the 15th of May, union warns care workers not to use UK government COVID-19 app. GMB union tells members care workforce app gives bosses access to private messages. Of course it does.
Yeah.
So care workers have been warned by a trade union not to use a government app meant to help them during the coronavirus pandemic because it allows their managers to identify staff who have complained about pay, testing, and PPE equipment. So there you go.
Incredible. It's just a spiral after a spiral, just civil liberties issues coming out of the wazoo as government overreach for something that you and I both know has been over-exaggerated at least, if not, I won't go any further to keep us on air, but it's not a sound block of science that we're sitting on, but the actual invasions of privacy are. It's amazing that it takes the union to stand up for its individual members, rather than like, don't we have like, aren't there anybody that works in the public domain for our civil liberties like all of ours? What do you gotta be a nurse now to get like your rights protected? It's just like, aside from, this is already known what they're giving information apparently about our, medical histories are, Jim, is just, they're just not trustworthy people. And you can go, yourself, all the, briefcases left on trains and all that kind of like, there's no reliability with our most vital statistics with the government full stop, let alone all the different, through the fusion doctrine, connections that our information goes to, including, I'm going to say, other people's militaries. So, we're in dark times. I'm glad someone's standing up. There's some pushback.
And this track and tracing system, I've got an article here from Saturday the 30th of May.
Does it end with horse shit? Is horse shit? It wouldn't be nice. Wouldn't it be a perfect... This track and tracing system is horse shit. Thank you.
Well, more or less that's what the person says. I say this person because the Guardian has used it as an anonymous source.
Oh, sure.
Why I quit working on Boris Johnson's well-beating test and tracing system. He says, we're not highly trained.
Yeah.
We've been sitting around doing nothing. Yeah. This programme is not fit to bring Britain out of lockdown. So, yeah, that's not exactly a ringing endorsement.
No, not exactly at all. No, it's terrifying, Jim. The entire track and trace concept is in itself, before you get into the unreliability of the testing that it's based upon. And I've seen it described today on other programs that, you're basically, you volunteer your medical records, and then there's a possibility, especially if you live alone, that you could be incarcerated solitary confinement, as in like kept on your own for up to 2 weeks because of somebody else's, any variable of inconsistency on the end of what a complete innocent could be treated like because of either an innocent mistake or being entrapped. Essentially, it's a hideous slope.
I thought I'd bring up this article. This is before the coronavirus really hit the world scene, so to speak. This is an article again from The Guardian. Police call, this is January the 10th, police call for a ban on anonymous pay-as-you-go phones. Police inspectorate says ban would help combat county lines drug operations. Police want to ban on the anonymous purchase of pay-as-you-go mobile phones to help tackle county lines drug dealers, a report reveals.
Christ.
So, I just wanted to bring that in for a little bit of history for the whole sort of phone thing and the surveillance thing, that there was a history for this before, COVID became in the world vocabulary, so to speak.
Yeah, that they were already trying to close loopholes.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk about this article first about the protests sort of happening all over the United States.
On fire! They're on fire everywhere, Jim. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll be talking about that. I just wanted to give my... I saw the footage.
Yeah, did you?
Yeah. Yeah, terrible. I'll say, rather than speak about a specific case, I'll talk about generalities. I never believe in capital punishment for logistical reasons, not moral reasons. I have no problem with an eye for an eye morally, but I don't trust any state or government to do it competently and efficiently, which means if there's a capital punishment in any government, there will be no government is 100% efficient and effective. I mean, we've seen that, for Christ's sake, with COVID. So that makes me say that if it has a less than 100% total success rate, that means innocent people are going to die. And if just one innocent person has to die in order, I think that makes it completely unjustifiable. So what I'm saying is, I believe in an eye for an eye mentality, but I don't trust the competency of any government to carry it out without killing innocent people. Therefore, I am against the death sentence. So anyone that ever says or anything speaks like that, you don't know what the guy did beforehand or anything like that. Right. Fair comment, but it's not a death sentence met out on the side of a road by someone's knee. Do you know what I mean? And so if I don't agree with the death sentence after a due process in a judiciary, prosecution and defence and habeas corpus and all that kind of stuff, why on earth would I believe in it on the side of a road, arbitrarily met out by a policeman, and executioner? I looked at that. What he did was inexcusable, really. Cuff him, put him in a vet. All right, fair enough. But you just don't do what the guy did. It was either negligent to the point where he's died as a result of negligence, or at best. And who knows if there's all this talk about them possibly working together. And I won't go off into that process, but sure. I think the whole thing was wrong. And it seems like I'm not the only one that thinks it's wrong.
No, seems not. It seems you're in good company, Jim.
Shen and Alan Butterfield and a few other people. Yeah. So here we've got the Curse of the Daily Mail advert restricting the headline. But here we are. Beauty queen wife of Minneapolis cop Derek Chauvin files for divorce on same day he is arrested and charged with George Floyd's murder, and says she is devastated for the dead man's family.
Sure.
Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin kneeled on George Floyd's neck during an arrest over an alleged fake $20 bill on Monday, leading to his death. So it looks like he was handing out funny money, which isn't a death sentence, even after a judicial process, let alone met out at the side of the road. I don't think that cop meant to kill him, because I don't think he would have been quite, happy before all the people to film him murdering him, on camera and everything like that. So I seen it, and I look more on the side of criminal negligence. He obviously still needs to serve some sort of jail time, but I don't look upon it as first-degree murder. I look upon it as probably manslaughter. He meant to kneel on the guy's neck, but he didn't mean to kill him. So I lean more towards manslaughter. But as ever, we're not doctors, lawyers, or anything like that. We're just a couple of off-duty comedians sounding off on our views of the world. What do you take on the whole thing, Mr. Campbell?
I think that there's been a lot made of the extrajudicial punishment that somewhat could be said led to Mr. Floyd's death. Sorry, the point was made today that so far no Western nations have made any pleas to the UN about the gross use of force by any of America's security, including the police and National Guard and all the different involved authorities. So that's an interesting point that was made, that we live in a world where there's so many lackeys that it's essentially admitted that we only use the accusations of breaching of human rights as a tool in our vilifying of others on the earth. So it's basically, if you're not in the big club, then if you beat people up, you're breaching their human rights. But if you're in the big club and you beat the living tar out of people or shoot at them when they're on the porch, as I'm sure you've seen the video of doing the National Guard coming through the streets of Minneapolis. And we're in a place where there's a lot of scrutiny on the police. But I also have to say that, and I look, as you do, also for feel-good stories, because they're out there. And there's the story of the police kneeling in Portland and, having warm moments. There's a lot of warm interactions also. So, I think, like most things, Jim, that the U.S. is a many-faceted thing with many different interactions going on. But there is definitely some brutality happening on behalf of the state, which I find funny because, there's like the brutality that you're talking about that led to a man's death on camera, slowly for witnesses. But then the response to it is also police battering protesters and rioters in settings where they should really just be put in zip ties and put in a van. There's no reason for any cops anywhere to just be like leathering the shit out of people, if they're stealing running shoes. It makes no sense to like judge, jury, and executioner, and it's like that should never be happening ever, and it's happening.
I've seen a lot of US police condemn it and agree with protesters and stuff. So
that's important to note, isn't it?
In the US as well. Just to back up kind of what you were saying, I won't dwell on this. I just wanted to sort of source what you were saying. This is from NBC News. Curfews go into effect in cities around the country as George Floyd protests continue. Curfews will be in effect Saturday evening in Minneapolis, Seattle, Portland, Denver, Atlanta, Los Angeles, Cleveland, Columbus, Pittsburgh, and Philadelphia. So yeah, just backing up what you were saying earlier.
Yeah, and just to say, Jim, as well, we are just a couple of local yokels. However, or yokels, more so than locals. There was comment made that I believe, whether it's the chief of police or the mayor of Minneapolis, there's been some like higher up that said that they don't in any way condone the move that was being put on Mr. Floyd, and that they don't know where it's come from. They don't know the type of training that the officer was applying, but it's certainly not sanctioned or approved by the department. So we're in a place where, once again, there's just no refined training, it seems. It's mentioned a lot. I'm sure you're aware of it, Jim, but there's all kinds of like training on how to kill people and track them and all that kind of stuff. But there seems no subtlety in dealing with just like arresting people who are having a bad night, or had 3 too many shots, or got carried away at their own birthday, or all of the subtleties lost. And it's just we're watching people be unnecessarily murdered in front of the public eye, and it's on all sides of the political spectrum to spread all different stripe of hate and distrust, and there's all the agent provocateur rumors about and abounding, and the pallets of bricks left in strategic Molotov cocktails full of petrol hiding in bushes, and who did it, who knows. Bad forces are at work everywhere, but regardless, you should be able to get arrested by a cop and not be like have your life choked out of you for 9 minutes, and it's sad that that's the reality of it.
We don't know what's going on there at the moment, but I just wanted to bring up this article from 6 years ago from The Guardian, just to talk about what you're saying. Undercover officer pulls gun on Oakland protesters after cover blown. Plainclothes governor patrol officers have walked among demonstrators for weeks, reports stated. A patrol officer who had infiltrated protests against police violence in Oakland pulled a gun on demonstrators after his partner's cover was blown. So that's not exactly agent provocateuring, but I think if people look into that for George Soros' funding into all things like that, perhaps that's something we can do for future casts. But if the audience were to Google agent provocateur American protests, of course you're going to get your tinfoil hat nut job sites, but you're also going to get plenty of mainstream articles from. It was well covered at the time. So just to give you an idea that, not all is as it seems. And speaking of the Minnesota officials, this is from USA Today on the 30th of May.
They're good.
There are anarchists. Minnesota officials say.
Remember when those used to be our biggest worry, Jim? The anarchists
say outside agitators are hijacking peaceful protests. Minneapolis drifting out of the shadows in small groups, dressed in black, carrying shields and wearing knee pads. They head towards the front lines of the protests. Helmets and gas masks protect and obscure their faces, and they carry bottles of milk to counteract tear gas and pepper spray. Most of them appear to be white. They carry no signs, and they don't want to speak to reporters. Trailed by designated medics with red crosses taped to their clothes, these groups head straight for the front lines of the conflict. Now, again, we want to make it clear there are going to be all sorts of parties involved in agitating trouble, everything ranging from Antifa to possible agent provocateurs, false flagging themselves. Who knows what's going on? But I just want to put it in historical context to say all sorts of things have happened in protests in America in the last 10 years. Go and Google it for yourselves. All sides have done some very odd and devious tactics and things. So who knows what's going to go on this one. But, I get totally
I got some ideas. I got some ideas of where this is headed, Jim.
I was just saying, it's not anarchy to want to be arrested without, being charged. The police officer involved has been arrested. He has been charged. Yeah. The officials do seem to have acted well here. They've completely condemned it, said we didn't train him to do that. with firing him and arresting him.
The argument, I think, is that they waited, from the Monday to the Friday or the Monday to the Saturday. And, hey, Jim, we've already got example. How long did the wife stick around?
Yeah.
The wife got out of there quicker than the city could get charges down. But there's also, as I'm sure, again, you're aware, that there's a reticence to be overly hasty with your prosecutions in the States and your accusations, because they can be integral in the fair running of a trial. And obviously that's part of the stress of this, is that a lot of people are asking for a first-degree murder charge. And like you mentioned earlier, if there's suggestion that they had prior contact, as in they knew each other outside of working hours, for example, as Mr. Chauvin being a cop and Mr. Floyd being not a stranger to him, then there's all kinds of, it's a powder keg of...
potentially not a stranger. There's also...
Potentially not a stranger, yeah, absolutely. Which, these things are complicated and they're going to need like a trial to work out potentially. But it looks like they went safely to have the threshold of guilt be to a degree that they can almost guarantee a conviction, and it seems like I think I'm certainly admitting that I'm naive to the complexities of the U.S. legal system, so it may not be that they were entirely dragging their heels on their charges against the officer, but they maybe had good reason to not want to jump too quickly. But then that, of course, that's what's led to this bursting and bubbling of energy that a lot of the protesters are demanding that the charges be advanced, and that the other three officers present are similarly charged with at least a level of murder. So I mean, there's so much complexity to this, but it seems strange. It feels like we're talking about a book, Jim. It's like external to us and surreal, but like there's rioters, or whatever you want to call them, like insurrectionists, that have broken into the grounds of the White House. Only the Canadians have ever done that, Jim. And now the Yanks are trying to burn their own goddamn White House down. They haven't even asked us how to do it again, but we, we're in this like completely mad world of, when you mentioned where's it going to go, I think we know where it's going to go if it keeps escalating. And that's one of the reasons, you've asked people to look up the concept of the agent provocateur, the concept of it, quite simply and quickly being that the escalation is done by the state itself with saboteurs behind the lines of the protesters, to then allow the state to escalate the violence against the protesters. And that's the terrifying aspect of what we're talking about, is that now you're into who deals with that mess. Well, I'll tell you who. The Army. The Army is who. And now you're into a whole different, appeals process of who's putting your head up your ass and not asking you nicely about it.
It's not just that, it's also the hearts and mind aspect. Is the public opinion behind the protesters? Okay, let's get them to firebomb a few local shops, and then the public mindset will change.
Yeah,
and
right.
We can divide and conquer that way.
Right.
Again, we're not saying that's what's going on, and it doesn't take any. Here at Cruise, we play devil's advocate from all different angles. You know? There's so many people that get their egos involved in, like, this is my opinion and I'm fighting it no matter what evidence comes in. Whereas, I know you're the same, Craig. We just look at different angles and things and look at different people's points of views. And, I think of the potential. Who knows what's going to go on. I think in a week's time we'll have a lot more to say about it. Again, will people be censored on social media for certain views and everything like that? Which brings us
on to our next story. I'll bet, Jim. Damn right. Where are we at with this? This is complicated.
So, Fox News, Morgan Phillips, what's in Trump's executive order on social media? So, President Trump signed an executive order to rein in social media giants on Thursday. The order comes after Twitter added a fact-check label to one of the president's tweets about mail-in ballots. So a quick view on this. Everyone always says they're private companies and they can do what they want.
Yeah.
As a libertarian that respects private rights, I get that point of view. However, there are also certain laws. Again, I claim ignorance of the
intricacies of U.S. law.
Yeah, and world law and UK law, certainly internet law.
Yeah.
But
I don't know much about coleslaw.
Yeah.
When it comes down to it.
But yeah, essentially there are laws which talk about commonplace speaker's corner type things being used. There are certain laws, I think, that could be used on that. And there are also certain selective laws. I mean, YouTube is called YouTube. It's not called certain YouTube. There's also a certain amount of false advertising. There's also arguments to say people that brought in revenue for YouTube with certain channels and things like that to help them build that platform. There's to then build them up, have them spend revenue to build up subscribers and time and all that kind of stuff. For them to be arbitrarily kicked out without any appeals or defense panels whatsoever.
Yeah.
So people can say they're private companies, they can do what they want. However, there are consequences to private companies doing what they want when they may go too far, and also they're protected by the editorial laws, I believe, to say that they're not liable for anything that anyone says on their show. And I agree with that. If we have a guest on this show, we shouldn't be liable for everything that they say. We should just be given a platform for them to say what they say. So I get that. So there are all but there's some asterisks to law there. There's the common speech laws.
Yeah.
There's the contract partnerships about people building up platforms and spending revenue on that and having no degree of appeals. And there's the editorial issue. So there's three legal points there that people have a point of contention, and that Donald Trump has a point of contention. And this all, of course, legally I'm talking about, but morally, I've talked about this before, give everyone a platform. If someone isn't, unless they're calling for a crime to be committed, and that includes the most despicable of people, because, let the KKK have their Facebook page. I want to be able to see who goes on it, so I could never speak to these people or have anything to do with these disgusting racists in my life. But let them have their page. Let's see who the nut jobs. Let's see who the freaks are. Let's have their nonsense put out to be criticised by the world. Don't tuck it away in a corner and make it mysterious and dark and you want to know what that person says or anything like that. Have it all out there. Have it all open to scrutiny. That's what I say. What do you reckon?
Yeah, that's Jim's version of freaking at the freakers ball. Everybody's welcome. Pour the booze on them. Let them dance around the wheels of life. Let them unfold. Well, the slippery slope that you go down when you start to take responsibility as a publisher for truth is a very difficult place to be. But I lost my train of thought of what I wanted to interject with, and it was so esoteric.
That's okay. Well, while you think of that,
remind me of the beginning of the last article again. Just
it was about Trump's executive order on social media.
Yeah. Yes.
Zuckerberg knocks Twitter for fact-checking Trump. Says private companies shouldn't be the arbiter of truth. Now, I agree with him when he says that. Yeah. But what he does,
his motivation is
a totally different story. I mean, we covered it on previous podcasts about the whole Facebook fact-checker, about the lab in Wuhan, China, working there. I mean, what absolute... I agree with every word he says, but I don't believe that he means a word of it.
Right. You think?
And having said that, I'm fully aware that this is going out Thursdays at 6 p.m. on Watershed. But hey, I should be allowed to say that I don't believe him, right? And
well, of course, that's the point, isn't it?
Slightly bothered about that, he should be able to say, "Well, that Jim is an arsehole." He should be able to. Just as the Black Panther should be on Facebook trolling that KKK page all day long and vice versa. Everyone should be able to say whatever they like so long as they're not calling for a crime to be committed. That's where I stand.
I agree. And I think now that this is falling further into a place of where there's disbelief in the veracity of social media setting truth narratives. So we've just basically got polar opposites once again working in our public feeds. That's what I wanted to say earlier, Jim. The idea that, like what you're talking about, legally, the partnerships that exist between people who, like you say, build up a profile on YouTube and then help YouTube's profile and then get their legs cut off and they have no right of appeal. All of these different relationships that business or civil society has to be respectful of. They all mainly come from, or a lot of them anyway, come from English common law, of course, and which in many ways also is just logical. Right? It comes across as very, it makes it, where your property line ends, the other person's begins. Anything that you do that affects that is corresponding to your responsibility toward that. Things like seem to make sense. And when you were talking about that, this is the bit that I thought was quite esoteric, and I didn't want to interrupt you. But it also, you mentioned briefly earlier where you were talking about getting a couple of buildings burned and get some energy taken out, and people put that that allowance for the public to vent their spleen, essentially. That maybe that's why you were mentioning, maybe that's the motivation for an agent provocateur, to let to the best way to fight a forest fire is to make it bigger and take away its oxygen, right? Like starve it of oxygen, starve it of fuel by creating a huge fire that everybody can, like fireworks, oh, okay, it's out of our system. But the point I was thinking of when you were talking about that, Jim, is it just made me think that common sense and normal people just don't really agree that you should go downtown for any reasons and burn other people's stuff because you're upset. It's an entire media coercive narrative to make it in any way seem that you should, when you see problems on the news, that you should then get on, your bicycle and head down into the epicenter of a raging riotous inferno and, run around with your pink bandana on or whatever, your favorite fucking hockey mask and just be hanging out, maybe start a fire, maybe I won't, it's just nobody's on side with that. There's no upswelling of public support for just go burn our fucking city down, you lunatic. Nobody thinks that way, but we kind of are lent to believe that that's just cops killed a guy and there's a lot of anger in people and you just let him go burn down. It's just madness. It immediately becomes madness, right? It becomes like a destructive war zone. Sorry.
Yeah, even without agent provocateurs, you're going to get a powder kegs of different opinions. You're going to get a mixture of protesters that are peaceful protesters there with a very good point about that guy. It was horrible what happened to him. Yeah. You're going to have some protesters that probably don't even know the guy's name. Another excuse to kick off? Let's go burn some stuff and loot some stuff. You're going to have that mixed in. And on the other side, you're going to have the police. You're going to have the police that are going to go, man, I don't want to do this. I agree with the protesters. And then you're also going to have the police that's great, I'm going to go and beat someone up with a baton today. Lovely. So you're going to have a mixture of all sorts of personalities mixed in that crowd on both sides.
That's why it's just so hideous that it's come to this. And you and I both know it's representative, emblematic of people's energy. It's not not to take away the uniqueness of a man's life to be taken to start this. But the fact is that this anger has been welling up for so long, and it exists in so many different capacities. And I think I've heard it said elsewhere, but I agree with it, Jim. All the things that you've talked about, all those different characters that are feeding the blaze, that we're in a place where the genie back in the bottle is like a a larger and larger pipe dream. How to stop this? How to stop this contagion of anger? How to stop the war online that leads to the war in the streets? How is this going to? I think you and I are sharp enough to realize our vulnerability to it, and I've mentioned that in my own life here. Like, we can't think that we're just going to watch America explode and burn, hundreds of different cities, and think that it's not going to, like it already has, come to Trafalgar Square here, and where that anger isn't going to spill into the streets of Europe and the rest of the world. It's a very temperamental time.
Oh, for all police is going through people's shopping bags and putting people's doors through, all the stuff that we brought up on this show, and we said awful police. We never covered a story of a British policeman doing something like that. So I think this is just, there are levels to this thing. There will be levels to the lockdown rebellion. There will be levels to the protest. And I think the levels of violence in Britain will be minimalised next to those in the United States, I think. Yeah,
I agree with you, but I also think that it's less specifically about the death as much as it's about people's displeasure and dissatisfaction with the direction of government and the as you say, the relationship with the police and what people feel the police's priorities should be. I saw that mentioned today, in fact, on social media in the UK, that somebody had said, why are these people down here bothering the police over something that's happening on the other side of the world? And it's like, well, don't get fixated on it being George Floyd's death. It's not that specifically. It's like, they've also been locked in their houses for 10 weeks. They've also had, many of them had their job prospects taken away, let alone their next paycheck. So there's all kinds of, this confluence of incompetence that, people are bringing out. And I think it has a lot less to do, I think there's the flashpoint of Minneapolis, but it probably has a lot less to do with that. And there's just what's the collective term of a disgruntle? It's like a mass disgruntlement. People are unhappy. A gripe. It's and the weather's hot, and it's just all the ingredients that if you've seen Dog Day Afternoon, or if you've studied, as I'm sure you have, we spoke today strategically of certain battles. If you've studied the genesis of certain famous riots, there are ingredients that once they pick through these things afterwards, the sociologists or whoever it is that studies us in the future, Jim, they will see that there were a lot of different reasons why this shit hit the fan in the summer of 2020.
Yeah, I mean, if people want to protest the lockdowns, then protest the lockdowns, but don't piggyback it on the back of some poor bloke's death. Do you know what I mean? Totally.
It diminishes it also, and I've seen that mentioned, but it's so true. It's just I can't wrap my head around. I can't see why stealing a pair of running shoes is a good protest against a man's life and the disrespect for that life that is trying to be quantified in the protest or in the representation of the Protest Act. I have trouble wrapping my head around that. And I got to say, Jim, I don't have any nice shoes right now. This isn't coming from a place of bias. There's multiple reasons why when I see somebody with a pair of brand new running shoes, there's a bit of me that's thinking, what size are they? And I'm eager, but I also don't see that that it doesn't just take away from the beyond things as dramatic as an arson, for example. Why it doesn't take away from the point of the solemn outpouring. It's tragic. It's funnily enough, it was mixed emotions for me hearing that you'd watched the entire tape, because I've only listened so far to dialogue of people like yourself who have watched the entire 9 minutes is now famous, and I just I had trouble over the last week. There's a bit of me. that I've seen people die. I've seen lots of video of people die. I'm not proud of that, but I'm also, not embarrassed by my own curiosity. But I just haven't been able to dig into this one yet, Jim. I don't think I right now need to see a man's life taken, and so futilely, with witnesses and the finality of it, of the body being moved by paramedics. I understand it's like quite obvious that he's not responding, and it's just like, I admire that you have the fortitude and the ability to watch that, but Jesus Christ, like, how it's like the worst comedy of errors. How possibly, there's people all, hey, excuse me, sir, he's saying he's not breathing, excuse me, other police there, the whole, like, how can it possibly happen?
There was only one video I couldn't watch like that, and that was a few years ago, where the police were tasering this special needs guy to death. That was horrific when he was begging for his mum. That was the only one I really couldn't watch to the end.
Yeah, that's what I mean. They're hard. They're hard on you. You're still remembering it now. I might be weak to say so, but I believe that that we're sensitive to these kind of traumas, because you're an empathetic being, and watching something that you can't contribute your help to I'm not saying it takes something away from you, but it takes healing. It takes some healing.
Yeah, I had to switch that one off.
I'll bet.
I can't remember what happened to those officers now.
I find it galling as well, Jim. If I can interrupt you, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you were telling something about that. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I was just going to say, if we're talking about protesting lockdown, then protest the lockdown. But there's really no need to go out and burn and loot down any shops. I think a nice little intellectual argument, and you could point out one of the articles along these lines, if you want. This is by Cheryl Jacobs from the Daily Telegraph. The lack of evidence lockdowns actually worked is a world scandal. There is still not a shred of real proof that the planet's reckless stay-at-home experiment made any difference.
Wow.
We have detonated the global economy to pursue a lockdown experiment that may not have worked, according to the latest evidence.
Wow.
This diabolic revelation should be a world scandal. It should also be a sobering moment of enlightenment for Britain as we seek to salvage our economy while learning lessons on how to better protect the vulnerable. Instead, the COVID narrative becomes ever more surreal. We've been saying this from episode 1, that there is, at the very least, a point of diminishing returns on the lockdowns.
Yeah.
And we always compared it with Sweden, and the idea of I'm all in favour of the domestic, locking down the airports. That makes sense to me. But we may have reached the point of diminishing returns, and there may be evidence to suggest that those returns were not as high as we had originally hoped for. And also, let's not forget, this isn't going to be free money that we're getting in all these, handouts and things like that. The taxes are going to have to go up when the economy improves. VAT, income tax. Who knows what they're going to do? But I don't know of any government that ever gives out something for nothing to its people. Doesn't make them pay for it somewhere down the line. I would be amazed if that was the case, especially this Tory government.
Yeah, and not to forget that they haven't got to the bottom of the huge conundrum of the realization that lockdowns create secondary deaths. Each one with their own story, and
there's a whole spectrum of that as well. You've got the instant stuff, which is cancer screenings down, suicides, but you'll also have the longer term effects that poverty, starvation as a result of unemployment, short-term and long-term death.
Yeah, and all we're seeing, I think we mentioned in other episodes, are just astronomical suicides in anywhere that it's being studied. So, the suicide rates are just hideous, and this whole thing compounding and turning into flames is just things couldn't look worse, Jim. I know you and I pride ourselves on being optimists in the storm, but I'll keep trying with you, and I enjoy doing so. But I can say I'm pretty pessimistic with how things are developing in front of us.
I think things will get worse before they get better, but I think things will get better. I think we'll have begun to cherish more free speech online, free speech in person. I think we'll have gone through some of the divide at that point. Don't forget we're in uncharted territory with social media. The whole Facebook thing has never been done in the history of humanity. So there's. I also think people are going to be looking more in this decade at what I think this has made people question their lives about what's important.
Totally, I get that.
Enjoy the time off. Yeah. So I think that this is going to be getting worse before it gets better, but I think it's going to get better for a number of ways because people are going to rebel against the tyranny. But I think it will be a natural. People will start to value it and stand up for it more. Rights aren't rights unless you exercise them. So I think you're going to start to get people to see they're going to know more about their rights. They're going to appreciate the the simpler things in life. Things will get better, but they will get worse before they get better. But I see them getting better on a number of reasons, really. Not just the fact that I think people around the world are going to start to understand that non-conspiracy theorist types are going to start to see that some conspiracy theorists have a point. And I think, not all the way down the rabbit hole, but I think they're going to start to see that they've got a point and they'll start to do something about it in a lawful, peaceful, not so divide and conquer kind of way. I think I think we're going to be about as divided as we're ever going to be in the world right now in terms of pro-lockdown, anti-lockdown, pro-Brexit, anti-Brexit, and extrapolate Brexit to Trump in America, Bolsonaro in Brazil, that kind of stuff. Yeah. The world is at its most divided, and these things never stay that way for long. We go in cycles of divide and unity and all that kind of stuff. And I think things will get worse before they get better, but they'll be getting better on a number of levels. And hopefully Cruz will be here to share that. The good times and the bad times.
I know it's only a subtle protest, but I believe it's there also, and I know that it's being looked into more now that we're on the ass end of this nightmare. If it doesn't turn into a second and third and forever wave coming, but one thing that has happened is the protesting and the rioting has put the kibosh on social distancing, Jim. Whether it's unofficial or not, it's a subtle act by the people to show that they're not afraid to be in each other's company at close quarters. And that's, to me, so important. That's such an important element of this, that it can't be left to asking or begging from authority to that which we deserve. And that's what we deserve, is our old interactions back. All this nonsense about, keeping people 6 feet 1 inch away and how we're going to keep people in bubbles and how you're only going to ever get on a plane if the most unreliable test ever in the history of man says that you sit in this category one way or the other. All these diktats that we're begging from entirely unjust people to get back. It's nice that these are just being taken. That's what they deserve to have happen. That they, people now, you see them on beaches. You see people are breaking out. They've had enough. It's not everybody. There's all kinds of people who are cautious, and they have every right to be, and they have every right to read and interpret data as they do, just as you and I do. But they don't have the right anymore to tell you that you can't leave your house for the benefit of them or anyone they can describe. That just can't happen anymore. And it's happened. It was a huge mistake, and it was an error. But I'm glad to see that at least some of the protesters are showing that that's part of what their argument is. And how ironic, Jim, that now, people wearing masks are back to what they should be, a danger to the public. It's not a concerting thing to see people walking around with their faces covered. It means they're up to no good. It means they're bandits. It means they're to be feared by common, decent people. And it's interesting to see that shifting in the States now. Back to...
Again, my libertarian stance is let people wear whatever they want. I don't care.
I'm talking about being mandated to do so.
Oh, yeah, you can't.
No.
We talked about that on previous shows.
Yes.
You can't. It's scary when a government tells you what to wear.
Totally.
It's even scarier when a government tells you that you have to take clothes off.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just think those are two very slippery slopes.
Totally.
go down.
And at least it's left to question now. If you see someone with a mask, you know that they don't have to be wearing it. So at least you can question whether or not their motivation is sound. And, if they're wearing it for health purposes, they're a div who hasn't looked into it and is putting themselves at much greater risk than they ever should. And if you think that it's probably a bandit, then you're probably, your spider sense is working and you should get the hell out of there. It's a win-win, Jim.
Yeah, for me personally, wear whatever you want. I don't care. It doesn't bother me.
Yeah, sure. Of course.
Yeah, I'm live and let live. Doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
The way COVID deaths are being counted is a national scandal. Yeah. How many lives have been lost?
Not a clue.
To disease. As a pathologist, he was just saying that. Read the article for yourself. We're short for time. It's the Spectator. All our articles can be found. I forgot where I was. We dropped out of Skype. But hey, we're here to get people to think for themselves, with themselves, make up their own minds. We're here to just tell you these stories exist and breathe through them, give you a quick brief on our opinion. All our sources can be found in the comments section or the descriptions of our videos on Facebook and YouTube. Our videos go out 6 p.m. on Facebook on Thursdays. YouTube 9 p.m. on Thursdays. Those are UK times. Please click the like button on Facebook, the subscribe button on YouTube, and we're going to be pushing onto more platforms as well. But we say that we do try. We do try. YouTube is a little bit of an arse. Sure do. We're on some podcast channels as well and things. But I just want to make certain that I'm happy with the mic level. That's why I'm not putting it more on the podcast thing, because I'm aware that, and it's all my end, by the way. I'm totally aware of that. It's all my end. So as soon as I'm happy with the sound, that's when we put it on more platforms. But our final articles this evening, we're going to have 4 final articles. This is the first of our final 4. This is from the 4th of May. This is something that we didn't cover at the time. UK government using pandemic to transfer NHS duties to private sector. Critics claim that Hancock has accelerated dismantling of state healthcare. So, there you go. There you go. No surprise there.
Didn't see that coming. No way. A Tory in a crisis? What?
Stories this evening on this 10th episode of Cruise. Thanks for viewing and all your fine feedback and kind words and everything like that. It means a lot to us. And
as well.
I fully intend for us to get to triple figures. So assuming we're not all
incarcerated,
some sort of horrible thing before then. 2020 is such a weird year. Who knows?
Yes.
COVID, killer hornets. And 3 days ago, Independent has written an article. Adam Smith has, not the famous financial guy.
No, he'd be old.
A planet the size of Earth has been confirmed around the closest star.
I saw that they've got a little Earth. They got a little Earth.
Yeah. There you go. I like these sort of feel-good stories. And
the closest star to us has an Earth.
Yeah, the planet called Proxima B, which already has a catchier name than Elon Musk's child, has a mass of 1.17 Earths.
Pronounceable.
Is located in the habitable zone of Proxima Centauri. The whole Elon Musk libertarian, man, say it, call your kid whatever you like.
Bull up, buddy. Bull up.
Yeah. And our next article, if I can bring it up, will be something that we're meant to cover in episode 9. And as ever, Craig verbally procrastinated around the issues of the day. And we're hell-bent on keeping this to no more than about an hour and 20 at tops of these podcasts.
Yes.
So this is an article from The Sun, the 22nd of May. Blast from the past. Fascinating 8-foot-deep sinkhole opens near Rome Pantheon, uncovering 2,000-year-old paving stones. An 8-foot-deep hole opened unexpectedly near the Roman temple's front steps earlier this month.
Wow.
And they're paving stones, apparently from 27 BC, Craig.
Wild. How cool. I love that stuff.
Yeah.
I love that stuff. I love
Pompeii. A little
Pompeii.
bit of history, a little bit of science here on Cruise. And our final story.
Have you seen the guy who died tugging off in Pompeii? Have you seen that one?
No, go on. What was that?
Just the guy that I guess just as the ash was falling and he was starting to become encased in stone for eternity, he just thought I better tug one out, and And the
yeah,
you've seen that, haven't you? Yeah, it's just outrageous. Just like, you always wonder what would you do. If you only had 1 minute to live, what would you do? And got it out and tried to tug himself to the afterlife.
Well, more is left through indecision than wrong decision, isn't it? So,
Yeah.
So our final article this evening. This article could make me eat my previous words. This is the 29th of May. This is from the BBC. Men hired for sexual fantasy break in to wrong house.
Yeah, I saw that.
In a sex fantasy gone wrong, 2 men with machetes entered the wrong house in New South Wales, Australia, before quickly realising their error. One of them...
Holy! How did they realise?
One of them has now been acquitted of entering a home armed with a weapon in July 2019, Australian media reports.
Wow.
They had been hired to carry out a client's fantasy of being tied up in his underwear and stroked with a broom. Boom, boom.
Wow.
They had been hired to carry out a client's fantasy of being tied up in his underwear and stroked with a broom. The judge concluded that the facts of the case are, and I quote, unusual. The roleplay was arranged over Facebook by a man near Griffith, New South Wales, who provided his address to the hired pair. Wow. So he was willing to pay 5,000 Australian dollars if it was really good, the judge said. However, the client moved to another address 50 kilometres away without updating the 2 men. They then entered a home on the street of the original address.
Holy!
When the resident noticed a light on in the kitchen at 6:15 a.m, he assumed it was a friend who had come by daily to make morning coffee.
Holy!
It's like, yeah, hey, I thought you'd make morning coffee. Why are you there with a broom?
And machetes. Holy!
Machetes and brooms.
Holy!
So, when the men called out the name of their client, the resident turned on the light and removed a sleep apnea mask he was wearing. So he would...
That's surreal.
So there's guys with machetes and brooms, and the other one coming out with a mask looking like Gonzo from the Muppets.
Wow. Wow.
And it was then that they saw them standing above his bed with the machetes, which they appeared to have brought as props for the role play.
Holy.
When they realised their error, one of the pair said, "Sorry, mate," and shook the resident's hands, according to local reports. The 2 men then drove to the correct address, where the client noticed one man had a great big knife in his trousers, or perhaps he was just pleased to see him, and then asked them to leave the weapons in the car. The client then cooked bacon, eggs and noodles, and a short time later, the police arrived at the property, found the machetes in the car, and arrested the hired pair. The judge ruled that the evidence did not suggest the men's actions were intentional. They carried the machetes either as a prop or as something to use in the fantasy, he said. The fantasy was unscripted, and there was discretion as to how it would be carried out. A lawyer for Terence Leroy, one of the accused, said, "It was a commercial agreement to tie up and stroke a semi-naked man in his underpants with a broom. Entry was not with intent to intimidate." I assume that they're talking there about the entry to the Hume, not entering him with the broom.
Sure.
So, so there you go. What do you make of that, Craig?
I think he made a mistake in not passing along the details to the to the men that he hired to scare him into willingness to take a broom handle. I guess I don't know if that's why there's a picture of the broom. There's a picture of the broom on the article that I saw. I couldn't piece together why there was a broom on it. I hadn't looked deeper into it, Jim. I was just like, oh God, that's what they're alluding to. Christ.
Do you think I should put the picture of the broom as the corner of the thumbnail?
Totally.
Let's
totally. You should, of course.
Any
no,
breaking
far be it
entries
from
or
us.
terrible things happen to them or anything like that. We're just talking about the fact that there are some weird people in the world, and God, I love the fact that we live in a world full of weird people.
That kind of diversity.
$5,000 Australian to be tied up and stroked with a broom and by men with machetes. I mean, it takes all sorts. It would be a boring world if everyone was the same.
Damn straight.
It's their business. If you want to hire someone off the internet that you've never even met to come into your house with a machete and stroke you with a broom, that's your business.
Just keep your details up to date.
Yeah, I would suggest though, it's rule number one, isn't it? When the gig venue changes, Craig, always tell the comedians.
Totally, 100%. What a better way to end. some sound advice. Episode 10, we did it.
Thanks for watching. Like on Facebook, please, and subscribe on YouTube. And what really helps more than anything is sharing the videos on your own personal social media pages. That really gets the viewership up. Yeah. New mic, we're going to be expanding out into other platforms, trying new things, getting guests. So from here, we've got the first 10 under our belt. These are the training wheels coming off now. We're going to go on from double figures to triple figures and get this. And, hopefully as this lockdown ends, we'll go out on the road a bit more, maybe interview a few people on the road as well, Craig. So
that would be nice.
That's what the plans we've got for
press the flesh
coming up.
Absolutely.
So thank you ever so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, share. It would mean a great deal to us. If you've got any articles that you want us to cover, tag us in the comments on Facebook or YouTube with crews or on our channels, and if we like them, we'll bring them up. Please make them as mainstream as possible. Weird stuff, including men with brooms and machetes, always welcome. Any closing comments, Mr. Campbell?
No, that's spectacular. Nice to be reminded. I'll dance with sugar plums in my head of the end of that episode. Jesus, machete and a broomstick. never would have thought. What makes you tick, huh?
There's not some broomsticks, eh? You could do it. I tell you what, you could do some great porn versions of that, couldn't you? So, but we leave that to the entrepreneurs.
To the professionals.
Yeah, we leave it to the $5,000 professionals.
We'll speak soon, Jim. Look forward to 11 already.
Cheers.
See ya.